Imagine living in a neighborhood where the grass police patrol harder than the actual cops. That's right, in my HOA community, a single blade of grass growing taller than Karen's standards was apparently a threat to suburban civilization. And Karen, clipboard in hand, made it her life's mission to make sure my lawn bowed down to her weekly schedule of perfection. I'm just a regular guy, middle-aged, working long hours, paying my bills, and minding my own business. But when Karen decided that my grass was the hill she wanted to die on, she woke something in me, something stubborn, something a little mischievous, something that didn't just want to survive her rules but wanted to flip them upside down. And that's exactly what I did. She forced me to mow my lawn weekly, so I gave her the greenest, neatest, most perfect lawn she had ever seen, except for one tiny detail: it wasn't real. Before I dive in, do me a favor, drop a comment below with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all watching from. Now, let's get into it. I'll never forget the day it all began. It was a bright Saturday morning. I had just finished a long week of work, hoping to finally sleep in, maybe sip some coffee on the porch, while my German shepherd snoozed at my feet. Instead, I was jolted awake by the sound of high heels clacking down my driveway like a judge entering the courtroom. And who else could it be but Karen, queen of the HOA, armed with her clipboard and that permanent scowl she must have been born with. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "Your lawn is 2 inches above regulation height," she announced like she was citing a federal crime. "HOA guidelines require weekly mowing. If this happens again, you'll be fined." Now, I'll admit something, yes, the grass was a little shaggy. But it was mid-June, it had rained like crazy, and I hadn't exactly been timing my life by the growth rate of fescue. I opened my mouth to explain, but Karen cut me off. "No excuses. Everyone else manages. We can't let standards slip. Property values are at stake." Ah, the sacred words of every HOA tyrant: property values. As if my slightly rebellious patch of grass was going to send Zillow into freefall. I forced a smile. "Got it, Karen. I'll take care of it." That was mistake number one. I thought complying would make her go away. I thought if I just pushed my mower around once a week, she'd move on to harassing someone else. But Karen wasn't the kind of person satisfied with control. She craved submission. And once she smelled weakness, she doubled down. The next week she was back. This time she tapped her pen against her clipboard as she spoke. "You didn't trim the edges. Grass along the walkway should be flush." I glanced at the sidewalk. There were maybe 3 tiny strands of grass peeking over the concrete, barely noticeable. But Karen saw them like a hawk spotting prey. And she added, "You left clippings. That's unsightly." I looked at the faint green dust left after mowing something the wind probably would have carried away within the hour. But to Karen it was evidence. She scribbled a note on her clipboard with a flourish that screamed guilty. That's when I started to notice the letters. HOA envelopes appearing in my mailbox like clockwork. Each one contained a notice of violation fines, starting at $50, then $100 warnings of further action if I didn't rectify the situation immediately. It wasn't just the lawn anymore. Karen complained about the timing of when I mowed. Apparently mowing at 10 a.m. was disruptive. Then she claimed my mower was too loud. One time, she even took a picture of me holding a leaf blower and tried to argue that it wasn't HOA-approved equipment. It was laughable, really, except it wasn't. Because every letter felt like a scarlet letter pinned on my chest. Every fine chipped away at my bank account. And every smug grin Karen flashed from across the street made my blood boil. The neighbors, of course, loved the show. Some whispered words of sympathy when Karen wasn't looking. Others openly sided with her, hoping to stay off her radar. And some just enjoyed the free entertainment watching the suburban gladiator match unfold. One evening I overheard 2 neighbors talking as I dragged my trash bins out. "Did you hear he got another fine?" Karen's relentless. "Well, his lawn is a little wild sometimes." I slammed the bin down harder than necessary, letting the echo answer for me. I tried to keep my cool. I really did. For a few weeks, I mowed religiously. Every Saturday morning, like a soldier reporting for duty. I trimmed, I bagged, I even swept the sidewalk until it sparkled. But it was never enough. Karen's eyes never left my yard. I'd catch her staring from her window like she had binoculars trained on me. She even started snapping photos from her phone for HOA records. It wasn't about grass anymore. It was about power, about control. And I was the perfect target, the guy who initially played along, the guy who didn't fight back. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know. I might have patience, but I also have limits. And the more she poked, the closer I got to snapping. The final straw came on the hottest Saturday of the year. The kind of day where the air feels like soup and your shirt sticks to your back before you even step outside. I was out there mowing, sweat dripping down my temples, my dog lying in the shade watching me suffer. And Karen, she stood on the sidewalk, hands on hips, supervising like she was the foreman of a prison chain gang. "You missed a spot," she shouted. "By the fence." I gritted my teeth and pushed the mower harder, fantasizing about all the ways I could silence her voice forever. Not literally, of course, but oh, the daydreams. Then she yelled again. "And don't forget, you need to bag everything this time. HOA won't tolerate clippings." I killed the mower engine and stared at her, chest heaving. She smirked, satisfied that she had broken me down one more time. But in that moment, something flipped inside me. I realized I wasn't broken. I was done. That night, as the sun set and the cicadas buzzed, I sat at my computer and typed 2 words into the search bar: artificial grass. And what I found changed everything. The pictures showed flawless lawns, perfectly green, year-round, immune to droughts, weeds, and most importantly, lawn police. I scrolled through product descriptions, reviews, even HOA legal forums. And that's when I discovered the loophole. Nowhere in our HOA bylaws did it say lawns had to be natural. They just had to be green, well-maintained, and consistent with community standards. Artificial turf checked every box, and better yet, some counties actually encouraged it for water conservation. I leaned back in my chair, grinning like a mad scientist who had just discovered fire. Karen wanted perfection. Oh, she was going to get perfection. She forced me to mow every week, but I was about to make sure I'd never mow again. And the best part, there wasn't a single thing she could do about it. If you've ever dealt with a control freak, you know one thing: once they taste power, they don't stop. And Karen, she was like a shark that had smelled blood in the water. The second she realized she could rattle me with her lawn obsession, she doubled her efforts. At first, I thought maybe she'd gotten her fix and would move on to someone else, maybe nitpick the neighbor who painted their shutters the wrong shade of beige or the family down the street with the squeaky trampoline. But no. Karen's spotlight stayed locked on me like I was the star of her personal reality show, Keeping Up with the Grass Offender. And I swear she was everywhere. I'd pull into my driveway after work, and there she'd be standing on her porch with a glass of wine, eyes glued to my front yard. I'd wake up on Sunday mornings to the sound of her sandals clapping against the pavement as she marched by my house, snapping photos like some kind of suburban paparazzi. I started wondering if she had a folder on her computer labeled "Evidence Against Neighbor." Then came the letters. One after another, like bills from a collection agency. Violation: lawn not evenly mowed. Violation: excessive grass clippings visible. Violation: mowing outside, approved hours. Approved hours. I had to laugh. When did grass mowing become a regulated activity? Was I supposed to punch a time clock before yanking the starter cord on my mower? And the fines, oh the fines. $50 here, 75 there, one even hit 100. Every envelope felt like another slap in the face. I started stacking them on my counter in a neat little pile, half tempted to wallpaper my garage with them as a shrine to HOA insanity. The thing was, no matter what I did, Karen always found something wrong. I mowed every Saturday at 9 a.m. sharp. Too loud, she said neighbors might be disturbed. I bagged every clipping and hauled it off. She claimed I left residue on the sidewalk. I edged carefully along the fence line. She marched over to point at one single stubborn weed, wagging her finger like she'd caught me shoplifting. It stopped being about the lawn. It was about control. She wanted me beaten down, bowing to her authority, acknowledging that she was queen of the cul-de-sac. And the neighbors, well, they didn't make it easier. Some would nod sympathetically when Karen wasn't looking. "She's tough on you," they whispered. But none of them spoke up publicly. Others took Karen's side, parroting her lines about community standards and property values. Then there were the rest who just loved the drama. I could see them peeking from their windows whenever Karen confronted me, sipping coffee like they were watching a soap opera. I'll admit it started to get to me. Saturdays weren't weekends anymore, they were battle days. My lawn wasn't grass. It was a war zone. I'd push that mower under the blazing sun, sweat soaking my shirt, knowing Karen's hawk eyes were trained on me from across the street. Sometimes I could even hear the faint click of her camera, documenting my every move like she was building a legal case. One day I'd barely finished mowing when she strutted up in her pink cardigan, clipboard under her arm like a general carrying battle plans. She didn't even say hello. "You missed trimming around the utility box," she announced. I stared at the small patch of grass she was pointing to, a spot no larger than a coaster. I almost laughed, but her dead serious expression stopped me. "Karen," I said slowly, "do you really think anyone cares about that?" She raised her eyebrows. "I care, and this community cares. Standards matter." And just like that, she scribbled something on her clipboard. Another violation incoming. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip that clipboard out of her hands and frisbee it into the storm drain. But instead, I clenched my fists, swallowed the anger, and walked away. But something inside me shifted that day. Up until then, I'd been reacting, mowing when told, trimming when told, bagging when told, playing defense while she played offense. But the more she piled on, the more a thought grew in the back of my mind. What if I stopped playing her game altogether? That thought became a full-blown obsession the day she hit me with my most ridiculous violation yet. It was early evening. I'd just finished dinner when I found another letter taped to my door. Not mailed, not left in the box. Taped to the door like some medieval proclamation. It read, "Notice of violation. Grass height inconsistent by approximately 0.5 inch across lawn surface." I actually laughed out loud. Half an inch. Was she crawling across my yard with a ruler? Did she own a NASA-calibrated lawn measuring device? That laughter turned into something else: determination. If Karen wanted a war, fine. But I wasn't going to fight it with mowers and trimmers anymore. I was going to outsmart her. That night I sat down at my computer, HOA bylaws open in one window, search engine in the other. I combed through every clause, every sentence, every tedious paragraph. The rules were clear. Lawns must be green, well-maintained, and consistent with neighborhood aesthetic standards. But you know what word never appeared? Natural. That's when the idea hit me like a lightning bolt. Artificial grass. I dove into research. High-end turf looked incredible, perfectly trimmed lush green and low maintenance. It was practically indistinguishable from real grass, except better. No mowing, no watering, no weeds. And the kicker, not a single HOA rule banned it. In fact, some cities were encouraging it to save water. I scrolled through reviews, photos, installation guides. The more I read, the bigger my grin got. This wasn't just a solution, it was revenge. Karen wanted perfection. She was about to choke on it. She forced me to waste weekend after weekend, sweating under the Sunday. She slapped me with fine after fine, humiliation after humiliation. But now I had a way to turn the tables. I leaned back in my chair, a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't going to yell at her. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to smile, nod, and quietly prepare the ultimate middle finger, a flawless lawn that she couldn't touch. And when it was done, Karen would lose her mind. I closed my laptop, heart pounding with excitement. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, confident, even a little smug, because now this wasn't just about grass. It was about beating Karen at her own game. And oh, how sweet that game was about to get. Every man has a breaking point. Mine arrived on the hottest Saturday of the summer. The day felt like punishment from above. The sun baked the streets so hard, you could have fried eggs on the asphalt. The air shimmered. Cicadas screamed from the trees like tiny demons mocking me. And there I was, trudging behind my mower yet again, sweat dripping into my eyes, shirt plastered to my back lungs, heaving with each push. I'd been out there barely 15 minutes when I heard it, that voice. That smug nasal nails on chalkboard voice that haunted my weekends. "You missed a strip." Karen, of course. She was standing on the sidewalk in her wide-brimmed sun-hat pink cardigan, despite the heat, and clipboard under her arm like she was the sheriff of Lawn County. One hand shaded her eyes, while the other pointed at a patch of grass by my fence, a patch so small I could have covered it with my shoe. I shut off the mower. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by cicadas and Karen's sharp inhale like she was preparing for her next attack. "You'll need to bag the clippings this time," she added. "HOA won't tolerate debris. And don't forget the edges. Last week's trimming was substandard." That word, substandard, she wielded it like a sword, slicing my patience in half. I gripped the mower handle so tight my knuckles turned white. I could feel my pulse in my temples. Every insult, every fine, every smug grin from across the street piled on top of me until I thought I'd explode. I walked toward her slow and steady mower, forgotten behind me. My dog, lounging in the shade, raised his head as if sensing the storm brewing. "Karen," I said, voice low but shaking, "do you have any idea how insane this is? It's grass. Grass. It grows. I cut it. That's life. You want perfection? Go to Disney World." She blinked, momentarily thrown off by my tone, but then her lips curled into that familiar smirk. "Rules are rules," she said. "If you can't handle them, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." And just like that, she turned her back and strutted away, heels clicking on the pavement, leaving me standing there fuming like a man about to combust. That was the moment I broke. Not in the way she wanted, not in surrender. No, I broke in the opposite direction. I stopped caring about her clipboard, her fines, her smug little power trip. If she wanted a war, she was going to get one. And I wasn't just going to win, I was going to humiliate her. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the HOA bylaws spread out like sacred scripture. I pored over every line, every clause, hunting for weaknesses. My laptop glowed with search results: alternative lawns, HOA loopholes, artificial turf installation. I scribbled notes like a detective cracking a case. And then I found it. The golden ticket. Artificial grass. Perfectly green. No mowing. No watering. No weeds. And most importantly, no rule against it. The bylaws required a green, well-maintained lawn consistent with neighborhood standards. Artificial turf checked every box. Heck, it exceeded them. It was the lawn equivalent of a luxury car parked in a driveway full of minivans. The more I read, the more my grin widened. Karen's entire crusade was about forcing me to mow every week. But with artificial turf, there'd be nothing left to mow. Nothing for her to police, nothing for her to fine. It was poetic. She wanted perfection, and I was going to give it to her, just not the way she expected. I clicked through websites like a kid in a candy store. There were rolls of turf so realistic you could mistake them for Augusta National Fairways. Options with different shades, textures, even fake thatch to mimic natural growth. I pictured Karen staring at my flawless permanent green carpet and choking on her Chardonnay. I didn't stop there. I called a landscaping buddy from college, asked him about installation. He laughed so hard when I explained the situation he nearly dropped the phone. But then he got serious. You know, a lot of HOAs try to fight it, but if it's not in the bylaws, they've got nothing. And man, once it's down, it looks incredible. Maintenance-free, she'll hate it. Music to my ears. By the next morning, I was making calls. Quotes, timelines, delivery schedules. The whole 9 yards. Literally. Meanwhile, Karen kept circling. She didn't know what was coming, but I could feel her tightening the noose, trying to get her final digs in before my plan unfolded. One evening, she caught me watering the lawn. Wasteful, she scolded, shaking her head. You know the HOA discourages excessive water use. Another time, she snapped a photo of me edging the sidewalk. Not even she muttered, jotting notes on her clipboard. I wanted to laugh in her face. Let her collect her evidence. Soon, none of it would matter. The delivery day came faster than I expected. A massive truck pulled up in front of my house, stacked with rolls of emerald green turf. The workers hopped out, sunburned and efficient, unloading like they were storming a beach. Karen emerged from her house instantly, like a meerkat spotting danger. Her sunglasses slid down her nose as she squinted at the truck. "What's this?" she demanded, marching over. "Lawn upgrade," I said, casually, sipping from a bottle of water like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her eyes narrowed. "That doesn't look like sod." "It's better than sod," I replied. "Maintenance-free, perfectly green, year-round beauty." She gasped, horrified. "You can't. That's not allowed." I reached behind me, pulled out my dog-eared copy of the bylaws, and flipped to the landscaping section. "Show me where it says, no artificial grass. I'll wait." For once, Karen didn't have an answer. She sputtered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering something about calling an emergency HOA meeting. I watched her go, grinning so wide my cheeks hurt. The workers unrolled the first strip of turf, and just like that, my war with Karen entered a new phase. By the end of the day, my yard looked like something out of a magazine. Perfect blades of grass, uniform color edges, crisp as if carved with a ruler. Neighbors stopped by gawking. Some admired it openly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. One whispered, "Karen's gonna lose her mind." Good. That was the point. I stood there on my porch that evening, cold beer and hand dog at my side, staring at my new lawn like a king surveying his conquered kingdom. For the first time in months, I felt peace. No mower waiting in the garage, no weeds taunting me, no sweat dripping down my back, just perfection. And I knew one thing for certain: Karen's meltdown was coming, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. If victory has a sound, it's the rip of sod coming up in long, wet ribbons. By 8 a.m., a crew of 4 was carving my yard like surgeons, box cutters, flashing spades, popping roots, wheelbarrows squeaking toward a dumpster that swallowed my old grass hole. Each scoop felt like deleting one of Karen's emails from my life. The foreman, a sunburned guy named Luis with mirrored shades, walked the grid with spray paint, snapping chalk lines as if we were laying a runway. I leaned on the porch post with my coffee and watched my weekends get returned to me. The spectacle drew people. First, Mrs. Patel jogging stroller and all slowing to a stop. Then Trevor from 2 doors down, beer already in hand because Trevor's clock runs on tailgate time. A middle school bike gang arrived, circling the driveway like vultures. And right on cue, the cul-de-sac gazered open and out, popped Karen's sun hat cardigan clipboard like a prairie dog smelling dissent. She came briskly, planting each heel like a stamp of authority. What exactly is happening here? She demanded, eyes locked on the rolls of emerald turf stacked like artillery shells. Renovation, I said, easy smile. Upgrading to a lawn that respects my time. That's not sod, she snapped. Nope, I said. It's better. Luis popped by with a measuring wheel. We'll get the subgrade to 2 inches, compact to 90%, then infill. Clean as a hospital floor. Karen recoiled as though he'd proposed paving over a national park. You can't just replace the lawn with carpet. See, that's the thing, I said, pulling the bylaws from my back pocket. The word carpet never appears, nor artificial, come to think of it. I flipped to Landscaping and Aesthetics section 6.1. Quote, all visible yard areas must be green, well-maintained, and consistent with neighborhood standards. No mention of biological requirements. Her nostrils flared, clipboard up, pen primed. I'm calling an emergency meeting. Terrific, I said. Call everyone. They can watch. Luis chuckled and motioned his crew forward. They laid a geotextile membrane like a magician's handkerchief, then poured base rock crushed granite that rasped like 1,000 tiny rebellions. The plate compactor roared to life, and the ground trembled, each pass flattening the earth into promise. The kids cheered. Trevor burped approvingly. Mrs. Patel filmed vertical video because of course she did. 20 minutes later, reinforcements arrived. Marjorie, the HOA president, in a visor as sharp as her haircut. Doug, treasurer, whose personality could be expressed as a spreadsheet. And 2 board members who looked like they'd wandered off a golf course. Karen marched at their head like a prosecuting attorney. Good morning, I said, as if hosting. Welcome to the 21st century. Marjorie's eyes scanned the scene tactical. We've received concerns. She glanced at Karen, who nodded as if she'd personally received a vision from the Department of Aesthetics. We need to ensure compliance. I had anticipated this moment so precisely that it was almost boring. Of course, I offered my marked-up copy of the bylaws. Please identify any clause I would violate when this installation is complete. Doug adjusted his glasses and began reading, lips moving. One of the golf guys prodded the turf roll with a shoe as if it might bite. Karen cut in. Artificial grass is tacky. It lowers property values. Trevor snort laughed. Lady, his lawn is going to look like a golf commercial. Marjorie frowned at him. Residents not on the agenda may not comment. Technically, we're standing on a public sidewalk, I said. No agenda required. Also, I slid over a printout the county's drought ordinance. The county encourages hardscaping and synthetic turf to conserve water, provided it visually matches natural lawns. Marjorie skimmed. Even she couldn't ignore a seal-stamped PDF. She pivoted to process mode. Installation must include proper drainage and be maintained free of debris. Luis, bless him, held up a perforated pipe like a trophy. French drains along both sides. Slope to the street. We do rain like Vegas fountains. Also, I said, sweeping an arm toward my neighbor's patchy crabgrass, I humbly submit this plan improves neighborhood standards. A few spectators failed to stifle laughter. The golf guys stopped pretending to be neutral. One murmured, man, that's gonna be slick. Karen bristled. This is an aesthetic community. Plastic grass is an insult. Synthetic turf, I corrected gently. High-grade polyethylene with UV stabilization. Feels like the real thing lasts 15 years. Want to touch it? I peeled back the edge of a roll and let the blades whisper in the breeze. She recoiled. I will not pet your fake lawn. Your loss, Trevor said already, barefoot and testing samples like a cat in catnip. Marjorie exhaled slowly. We'll observe. If once complete it fails to meet standards, we reserve the right to order remediation. Fair, I said. Measure me once I'm done. Karen sputtered, betrayed. Marjorie. But the president had seen the ordinance. She knew a losing battle when it waved in her face like a flag. With the peanut gallery on pause, the installation turned balletic. The crew rolled the first sheet emerald sliding over silver fabric in a clean unfurl that silenced the street. Luis knelt, running his hand backwards through the fibers. The blades rose with a satisfying shift like a crowd standing to applaud. They seamed edges with precision, tucking a hidden stitch every few inches, then brushed silica sand into the pile with push spreaders coaxing the fibers to stand upright in unison. The compactor hummed again, gentle this time, and the turf settled into place like it had grown there, like it had always been there, like Karen's reign had been a fever dream. And this was the awakening. Neighbors drifted closer onto the sidewalk, into the shade of my maple. Questions floated like pollen. Does it get hot? About as much as concrete, Luis said. We'll mist on heat waves. You can also use T-Cool infill. He opted in. Do you have to mow it? Trevor answered for me deadpan, only with a toy mower. Do dogs ruin it? I whistled. My German shepherd trotted out and flopped dramatically. He rolled, stood, shook, and looked 10% prouder than normal. He approves, I said. We'll hose once a week. Easy. I offered lemonade. Marjorie took a cup. Karen did not. She stood half a step back, arms folded so tight her knuckles went pale, watching perfection assemble itself without her permission. For a tyrant of grass, this was a slow-motion coup. By noon, my entire front yard was finished. Crisp seam lines, invisible edges tucked under steel benderboard that clicked like punctuation. The curb strip, too, formerly a weed museum, now a runway of green. Luis misted everything. The blades glistened like dew without the trouble of dawn. That's when the white SUV rolled up. City code enforcement. Karen had called in bigger guns. A man in a sun-faded uniform stepped out, clipped a badge to his belt, and took off his hat. Afternoon, he said calmly. We got a report about lawn materials. Of course you did, I said. Would you like to see my permit? I handed him a folder. Replacement of landscape, no irrigation added drainage maintained per county water conservation ordinance. He flipped through nodding. Looks good. We mostly care about runoff tripping hazards at the sidewalk, and whether it's, he smirked, lime green AstroTurf from 1973. I gestured. We went with classy golf course, not mini-golf pirate ship. Luis tapped the seam with his shoe. Drainage channels here and here, slope verified. He handed over his contractor's license and insurance. The officer glanced, nodded again. Karen tried one last volley. But property values? He shrugged. Not our department. He tipped his hat at me. Looks nice. Have a good one. When he left, a cheer actually went up, small but real. It rattled Karen. She looked around like a queen, discovering she'd lost the room. I seized the moment. Karen, I said, keeping my voice kind the way you do, when you remove a splinter from a child, you wanted a well-maintained green lawn that honors the neighborhood. Look, I swept my arm across a flawless field. This is the most compliant thing on this block. She swallowed. Her eyes were bright with a cocktail of fury and disbelief. This sets a dangerous precedent. Of beauty, I asked. Marjorie set down her empty cup. We'll put synthetic turf guidelines on next month's agenda, she said. Face neutral, but voice resigned to reality. Meanwhile, welcome to the modern era. Karen pivoted so fast her hat nearly left orbit. She strode home without another word, a retreat that felt less like walking and more like a surrender ceremony. We finished with ceremony of our own. The crew fluffed the last corner, broomed the nap, and presented me the hose like a ribbon cutting. I misted the lawn. The water turned to diamonds. For the first Saturday in months, I wasn't dripping in sweat, vibrating with humiliation, or performing for a clipboard. I stood on my porch, raised a glass of lemonade, and let the quiet soak in. The neighborhood drifted away in ones and twos, but not before a few side conversations sprouted like well grass. Do they do backyards? Is there a pet-friendly option? How long's the warranty? I answered what I knew, and sent the rest to Luis, who distributed business cards like confetti at a parade. Late afternoon, when the street turned gold, I took off my shoes and stepped onto my new reality. It gave underfoot springy as early June. My dog galloped a lazy circle, then collapsed with a sigh that said, "Finally, this guy gets it." I lay back beside him and looked at the sky. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my life I didn't realize I'd leased to someone else. Across the street, Karen's blinds twitched. For a second, I saw her face there, pale, pinched, calculating. I gave her a friendly wave, then set a tiny plastic mower at the edge of the porch like a lawn gnome with a punchline. Just in case she missed it, I added a small note on a stake near the curb, "Weekly mowing handled." Petty, sure. But after months of pettiness weaponized against me, it felt like balancing a ledger. That night, the lawn glowed ghost green under the porch lights. My phone buzzed with texts, a neighbor asking for the contractor's info, my buddy sending a gif of a victory dance, an unknown number with a single message, "This will not stand." I didn't need a signature to know whose thumbs had fired that off. I smiled, muted the thread, and set my alarm for nothing. Sunday morning would arrive without the roar of a mower, without the lecture from the sidewalk, without the ritual humiliation. Karen had forced me to mow weekly, so I deleted mowing from my life. And tomorrow she'd realize just how permanent that deletion really was. It didn't take long for the meltdown to begin. By Monday morning, I already had 2 voicemails, both from Karen, both frantic. The first was clipped, almost businesslike. "This is a violation. We will not tolerate synthetic materials in this community. Expect fines." The second, recorded barely 3 hours later, sounded like she'd gone full banshee. This neighborhood will not be turned into a circus. Rip it out or else. I didn't call back. Instead, I brewed a second cup of coffee, opened my front curtains, and enjoyed the view of my flawless emerald lawn gleaming in the sun like a crown jewel. That evening, I noticed a gathering across the street, Karen's house. A half circle of folding chairs set up in her driveway, HOA board members fanning themselves with manila folders, neighbors trickling in with curious eyes. She'd called an emergency meeting. Of course she had. I grabbed a lemonade, dragged a chair onto my porch, and sat down to watch. If she wanted a show, I'd give her an audience. Karen stood at the front of her driveway like a televangelist, arms spread wide, clipboard, replaced with a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like printed-out Google results. This, she declared, pointing across the street at my house, is a travesty, a plastic mockery of our community standards. If we allow this fake grass, what comes next? Plastic trees, inflatable houses. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Some shook their heads in agreement. Others, though, glanced at my yard with something dangerously close to admiration. One neighbor, a mom wrangling two toddlers, raised her hand timidly. But it does look nice. And honestly, I wouldn't mind not mowing every week. Karen's jaw dropped. Nice, nice. It's an abomination. I sipped my lemonade and waved. Thanks for noticing, Jenny. Always happy to inspire. A couple of chuckles slipped out before Karen silenced them with a glare that could have curdled milk. Marjorie, the HOA president, cleared her throat. She wasn't the type to enjoy drama, but she had a duty to maintain order. Karen, have you confirmed whether artificial turf violates any bylaw? Karen flipped through her stack of papers. It doesn't matter if it's written down. It's implied lawns are supposed to be natural. That's the spirit of the rules, Doug the treasurer adjusted his glasses. Spirit isn't legally enforceable. Karen whirled on him. Don't you dare undermine me. But Doug was already muttering something about water savings and reduced maintenance costs as he stared longingly at my lawn. I decided to twist the knife. I strolled over with my copy of the bylaws, flipping it open to Section 6. Green, well-maintained, consistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Check, check, and check. I tapped the page. If anything, my yard exceeds standards. Karen, you should be thanking me. Her face turned crimson. You smug little Marjorie, cut her off. That's enough. This is an HOA matter, not a personal vendetta. But it was a vendetta, and everyone knew it. The longer the debate dragged on, the more I saw heads turning my way. People whispered about water bills, about how nice it would be to spend weekends at the lake instead of behind a mower. One guy even muttered, hell, I might get one too. Karen heard it. Her eyes darted around, panic blooming. The power she'd clung to so tightly was slipping through her fingers, blade by blade of artificial grass. This man, she shouted, stabbing her finger at me like I'd committed treason, is destroying our way of life. I grinned. If your way of life depends on me sweating in 90-degree heat every Saturday, maybe it deserves to be destroyed. That got laughs. Real open laughs. A sound Karen hadn't heard in a long time, laughter at her expense. The meeting devolved. Karen stomped, shouted, waved her papers like a flag of war. When logic failed, she went for theatrics. You're all blind, she shrieked. It's fake. It's all fake. To prove her point, she stormed across the street, heels stabbing the asphalt, and bent down to yank at my turf. She pulled. Nothing. She clawed at the edge with her nails, grunting like she was wrestling a wild animal. Still nothing. Finally, in a fit of desperation, she kicked off her heels and lay down on the grass, rolling side to side, flailing, shrieking, "See, plastic, plastic!" The neighborhood erupted. Kids pointed and laughed. Adults pulled out their phones, capturing every second. Even my dog joined in, barking happily at the unexpected show. I leaned over the porch rail. Careful, Karen. You'll crease it. She froze hair, wild blouse smeared with silica infill. The humiliation was complete. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Text threads, Facebook groups, even a couple of TikToks with titles like HOA, Karen versus Fake Lawn, who wins, spoiler, not her. Her reputation nosedived. Neighbors who once cowered under her watchful eye now smirked when she passed. Some even asked me privately about turf installers. A quiet rebellion had begun. The HOA board, sensing the shift, distanced themselves. Marjorie sent out an official statement. The board finds no current violation of community bylaws regarding synthetic turf. Translation, we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole. Karen, though, didn't let go easily. She fired off more letters, threatened to sue, even claimed my lawn caused glare that endangered drivers. Each attempt was weaker than the last. Each time I countered with calm logic, county ordinances, and the undeniable fact that my lawn looked immaculate. It drove her crazy. and every sip of lemonade on my porch tasted sweeter for it. One evening, about a week later, I set out 2 chairs on the lawn, invited a buddy over. We sat barefoot on the turf, clinking beers, watching the sunset while my dog sprawled across the fake grass like a king on his throne. Karen peeked through her blinds. I saw the flicker of her silhouette twitching with rage. "Beautiful night," my buddy said. "Perfect," I replied, and I didn't have to mow once. That was the beauty of it. She could scream, threaten, even roll around on my lawn like a toddler mid-tantrum. But at the end of the day, the grass stayed green, the fines stopped coming, and her power was gone. And for me, my Saturdays were mine again. Karen's meltdown was spectacular, but the war wasn't over yet. I knew she'd come back with one last desperate move. People like her don't fade quietly. They go out swinging. I just didn't know how wild her final attempt was going to be. Karen didn't retreat. She regrouped. By Wednesday, a letter slid under my door like a ransom note. Emergency rule. Change synthetic turf prohibited. Below, in smaller print, immediate compliance required. Removal within 10 days, or daily fines will accrue. 10 days. She wanted me to rip up a multi-$1,000 installation because she decided green should only grow one way. I read it twice, then a third time, and smiled. Because while Karen had spent her week practicing outrage, I'd spent mine practicing law well, the HOA version of it. I'd read the covenants, conditions, and restrictions so often I could quote clauses like song lyrics. And you know what those lyrics said: no rule change could apply retroactively without a supermajority vote and an explicit waiver of grandfathering. Even then, the board needed to show a compelling aesthetic rationale and offer reasonable accommodation. In normal English, you can't change the rules just to punish one guy. I grabbed a pen, wrote, "Nice try," and slid the letter back under her door. Childish, maybe. But so was the 10-day ultimatum. The real theater began Thursday night in the clubhouse. Fluorescent lights hummed. Stackable chairs formed tense rows. A poster board up front screamed, "Emergency meeting landscape crisis," as if a botanical hurricane had blown through. People packed the room, curious neighbors, the entire board, Karen vibrating behind the table like a chihuahua with a subpoena. Marjorie, the president, called us to order. "We'll hear from compliance first." Karen sprang to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see across from my house," she jabbed a finger, "in my general direction, is a plastic travesty eroding our values. Our bylaws intend natural lawns. We must act swiftly to ban synthetic turf and protect property values." She slammed down a stack of printouts, Zillow screenshots, articles with headlines like "Tacky Turf Ruins Neighborhoods," all from blogs with names like Verdant Purity. I kept my face still and waited. It took discipline not to grin. Doug, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "Before we discuss, I want to confirm the process. An emergency rule," Karen cut in. "We can pass tonight and force removal. He has 10 days. A murmur rose. 10 days sounded like violence disguised as paperwork. Marjorie frowned. "Karen, we must observe procedure, public comment, then the board deliberates." The mic came to me during public comment. I stood, held up my folder labeled exhibits, and let the room settle. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding copies onto the table. "County Drought Ordinance 12.403. It encourages water-wise landscaping, including synthetic turf, provided it is visually consistent with natural grass. My installation meets those standards. The county inspector already visited and approved drainage. He literally said, 'Looks nice.'" A wave of chuckles. Karen's jaw tightened. "Exhibit B," I continued our own CC&Rs. Section 6. Green, well-maintained and consistent with neighborhood aesthetics. No mention of biological. Section 11.3. No rule change may be retroactively applied without a 75% supermajority and expressed waiver of grandfathering. Section 11.5. Any change must be reasonable, not punitive. I installed in good faith under the current rules. Doug leaned in reading. He nodded just once, but it counted. I set down Exhibit C, a letter from the county's sustainability office. They're featuring pilot yards that reduce water use. Apparently I let the sentence hang. I made the list. I held up the email with a little county seal and a line that said, "Rebate approved. A check is on the way." That rustle, that was the sound of a room deciding it liked the sound of rebate checks. Karen lunged for the mic. "Rebates don't matter. It's about the spirit of the community. Exhibit D," I said, raising my voice just enough, "is about the spirit." It's video of Karen rolling around on my lawn screaming "plastic" while children laugh. Laughter rippled. Even Marjorie bit the inside of her cheek. "It's gone mildly viral," I added, "which frankly lowers property values more than my lawn ever could." Karen flushed so crimson I worried she might combust. And Exhibit E, I said, laying down the last item, is a conflict of interest disclosure, or rather the absence of one. The room stilled. I looked at Karen, then at the board. It turns out Karen's brother owns Elite Evergreen Mowing LLC, the company that holds our HOA's common area mowing contract. A contract renewed 2 months ago with Karen as compliance chair, recommending more frequent cuts due to community standards. A gasp traveled the room like a breeze. Heads turned toward Karen. Marjorie's eyes sharpened. Doug's pen froze mid-scratch. Karen sputtered. That's irrelevant. He's the best price. I placed 2 invoices on the table. Except the best price isn't once you add the compliance surcharge. He bills the HOA for extra inspections. Inspections Karen orders. Inspections that somehow always result in more mowing. Silence. The uncomfortable, heavy kind. Then whispers. Then louder whispers. People shifting, frowning, doing fast math in their heads. I finish gently. I don't care who cuts the common areas. But it seems odd that the person pushing weekly mowing rules also funnels paid inspections to her brother's company. And now she wants to ban the thing that would permanently reduce mowing. It wasn't a mic drop. It was a mic float, quiet and precise. And it landed. Karen reached for indignation but found none left. You can't. This is character assassination. Marjorie's voice was crisp. It's a potential conflict. We will address it. The room felt different now. Gravity had shifted. I sat down, and for the first time since this war began, I felt the board's gaze soften my way, not harden. The deliberation began. Doug started with the numbers: water savings significant. Maintenance cost homeowner, not HOA. Visual consistency high as installed. One of the golf guys admitted he'd gone over to touch the turf, and it felt expensive. That word hung in the air, and a dozen homeowners silently pictured their Zillow estimate climbing a notch. Marjorie took a breath. I propose we draft a formal policy. Synthetic turf is permitted with standards, pile height, color range, edging, drainage. Applications reviewed by the Architectural Committee. Existing installations that meet or exceed standards are grandfathered. A beat. All in favor, hands rose, board members first, then, as if by reflex, some in the crowd. Karen kept her hands in fists. Opposed only Karen. Motion carries, Marjorie said. Applause, polite at first, then freer. Relief loosened shoulders. Neighbors turned, gave me small nods. Trevor from the back let out a celebratory whoop and was shushed, which only made it better. Karen stood very still. Her eyes glittered with that particular heartbreak of a toppled petty tyrant. Not the loss of a cause, but the loss of leverage. She glanced at Marjorie. You're making a mistake. He's undermining me. Compliance isn't personal, Marjorie said. It never should have been. Karen reached into her bag, pulled a manila folder, and slapped it down. Then, I'm filing formal charges. Glare hazards. Heat radiation. Synthetic runoff. I have studies. She fanned printouts like a magician's deck. Doug peered at them. Blog posts, he murmured. From Grass's Life Quarterly. I stood again, not to grandstand, but to finish this humanely. Karen, I get that you care about the look of the neighborhood, but this started as you forcing me to mow weekly, and it became a crusade. You turned a lawn into a battlefield. Something in her face flickered, but it was gone too quickly to save. Marjorie tapped her gavel. Final item. Due to potential conflict and recent conduct unbecoming a board officer, I moved to suspend Karen as compliance chair pending review. The vote was not close. Even one of the golf guys who'd ridden in with her raised his hand against. A dull sound escaped Karen, not a sob, not quite, a collapse of air. She gathered her papers with jerky hands and fled the room, sun hat wobbling like a little white flag that refused to wave. The meeting adjourned and the board filtered out into the night. People lingered. Conversation sprouted. Who's your installer? Do they do backyards? I answered with calm generosity, because winning is sweeter without gloating. Trevor handled the gloating anyway. As I stepped outside, a woman I barely knew stopped me. I'm single mom, 2 jobs, she said, embarrassed. Every violation, it felt like I was failing. What you did, it helps more of us than you know. I nodded throat tight. Then it was worth every minute. At home, I clicked on the porch light. The lawn glowed softly. My dog lay down like a furry comma at the sentence's end. Across the street, Karen's windows were dark. For the first time in months, the cul-de-sac sounded like a neighborhood instead of a courtroom. I poured a nightcap and texted Luis, "You might get busy." He replied with a lawn emoji and $3 signs. Before bed, I opened my email. The county had followed up a photo request for their conservation feature, plus a line asking if the HOA would be interested in partnering on a water-wise community pilot. I forwarded it to Marjorie with a simple note: happy to help, no revenge post, no victory lap, just the delicious quiet of a war ended by paperwork and patience. Of course, stories like this never end with a single gavel. Power doesn't evaporate, it looks for cracks. And people like Karen, they hate silence. They need one last scene, one last scream into the void. I should have known she'd save her biggest swing for the very end. For the first time in months, Saturday morning felt like mine again. No mower roar, no clipboard knocking on my door, no sweat dripping down my temples as Karen supervised from the curb like a foreman. Just quiet. I brewed my coffee, stepped onto the porch, and stared at my lawn, flawless, glistening evergreen. My dog bounded out, rolled twice, and stretched out like a lion in the Sunday. Across the street, Karen's blinds twitched. I almost waved. Almost. But I figured I'd let the silence torment her instead. The HOA board had spoken. The bylaws had spoken. The county had spoken. Everyone but Karen had moved on. The neighborhood started shifting. Slowly at first, like a tide turning. Mrs. Patel, the mom with the jogging stroller, stopped by one morning. I called your installer, she said, smiling sheepishly. They're coming next week. I can't keep mowing with the kids. Thank you for, showing us it's possible. I grinned. Welcome to the resistance. Then Trevor, beer in hand, as usual, announced backyard turf, putting green. Already booked. Within weeks, 2 more houses had joined the synthetic revolution. My once radical yard was suddenly a trend. Karen must have been choking on her herbal tea every time she saw another roll of turf delivered. She tried one last time to rally the troops. I saw her flyering mailboxes with dramatic warnings. Fake lawns cause cancer and synthetic grass lowers property values by 40%. She even quoted some blogger named Green Guy 77. Nobody bought it. In fact, some of the flyers ended up taped to lampposts with doodles, big cartoon speech bubbles that said "Plastic Panic" with Karen's name scrawled underneath. Her credibility had collapsed. The woman who once terrified neighbors into silence now couldn't scare them into recycling her flyers. I'll admit it, I couldn't resist one last jab. One Friday evening, I placed a tiny plastic mower on the edge of the lawn right near the curb. Next to it, I stuck a little sign that read "Weekly Mowing Handled." It was childish, petty, and absolutely glorious. By the next morning, kids were laughing at it, neighbors snapping photos. Even Marjorie, our HOA president, stopped by on her morning walk. She shook her head but couldn't suppress a chuckle. "You're impossible," she said. "Just staying compliant," I replied. Karen didn't say a word. But her blinds slammed shut so hard it echoed. One evening, about a month after the big showdown, I came home late from work. Karen was outside, standing by her mailbox. Her posture was different, no clipboard, no smug tilt to her chin. Just a tired woman in a wrinkled cardigan. For a moment, I almost felt pity. She looked at me, eyes flicking to my yard, then back. "You think you won," she said softly. Not the shrill tone I was used to. This was something else. "I didn't want a war, Karen," I answered honestly. "I just wanted to be left alone." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her gaze dropped to the asphalt. "Rules keep things orderly. Without them, people do whatever they want." "Sometimes order isn't worth the misery," I said. She didn't reply. Just shuffled back inside door, closing quietly. For the first time, there was no slamming, no stomping, no dramatic exit, just retreat. After that, life in the neighborhood calmed. Kids played in yards without fear of Karen's whistleblowing. Families lingered on porches instead of hiding behind blinds. People actually smiled at board meetings again. The HOA even leaned into the change. With the county's help, they launched a water-wise community pilot program, putting our little neighborhood on a map for once. Rebates rolled in. Marjorie bragged about it in the newsletter like it had been her idea all along. As for me, my Saturdays transformed. I fished at the lake. I grilled with friends. I even started golfing again, ironic, since my front yard now looked better than half the courses I played. Every time I came home, I saw that perfect green stretch untouched by weeds, immune to Karen's wrath. And every time I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Looking back, it's almost funny how something as trivial as grass became the center of a war. But it wasn't really about grass, was it? It was about control. About someone who needed to dominate every square inch around her, and what happens when you tell her no. Karen forced me into a corner. She thought she could bully me into submission with rules, fines, and humiliation. And maybe for a while she did. But in pushing me that far, she also gave me the resolve to push back smarter, harder, and in a way she couldn't beat. The artificial grass wasn't just revenge. It was freedom. It was reclaiming my time, my peace, my dignity, and it turned out to be a victory for the whole neighborhood, not just me. Sometimes standing up to tyranny, no matter how small or petty, creates ripples bigger than you expect. So what's the takeaway? Life will always hand you a Karen. Maybe not with a clipboard, maybe not obsessed with grass, but someone who thrives on control, on making others miserable just to feel powerful. You can spend your energy fighting them blow for blow, exhausting yourself. Or you can outsmart them. Find the loophole. Flip the script. Turn their own obsession into their downfall. It's not just about lawns. It's about life. About refusing to let someone else's pettiness dictate your peace. And in my case, it was about realizing that sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting louder, it's making sure you never have to mow on a Saturday again. So to everyone watching, if you've ever had your own Karen moment, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments, whether it's about an HOA nightmare, a controlling neighbor, or just the pettiest argument you ever won. Let's share a laugh at their expense. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. There are plenty more HOA stories where this came from, drama, revenge, and yes, maybe even a few more plastic lawns. Because in the end, grass grows, Karens scream, but freedom. Freedom is artificial and it's glorious. At the end of the day, this story wasn't really about lawns or even about the HOA. It was about choice. About refusing to let someone else's negativity consume the parts of your life that should bring you peace. Karen thought she could control me through rules and intimidation. But in standing up to her, not with anger, but with creativity, I reclaimed something far more valuable than just a patch of grass. I reclaimed my time, my freedom, and my dignity. Life is full of people like Karen. They'll tell you what you can't do, what you must do, how you should live. And if you let them, they'll steal your weekends, your joy, even your identity. But the truth is, we always have the power to fight back, not always with fists or shouting, but with cleverness, persistence, and the courage to say enough. The victory here wasn't just mine. It was for every neighbor who was tired of being policed. It was for every homeowner who wanted to enjoy their home without fear of a violation notice. And maybe it's for you too, the reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to play someone else's game. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a Karen in your life? How did you deal with it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this saga of drama, comedy, and a little sweet revenge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next wild HOA story. Because trust me, there are plenty more battles to come.